Dear friends, now I need your attention and your silence. Please. Thank you. I want to tell you something very frankly. I had a dream about this panel almost for 1 year. And I want to tell you how it started. It was almost 2 years ago during Munich security conference, I think in 2017. And it was some panel discussion. By the way, moderator was also Richard Haas. And in the end of panel discussion, he said, okay, and now it's time for Q&A. Please, who wants to ask question, raise your hands. And one young, pretty woman raised her hand. Richard gave floor to this woman. Woman started to ask questions. He interrupted you. He said, please introduce yourself. And very nice, very calm, this woman said, I'm president of Estonia. Yes. And in this moment, of course, reaction in the room was incredible. Everybody applauded to this woman. And she just very nicely, very with self-confidence, very calm way continued her question. And it was very telling about her, about Estonian character. And from this moment, President Kaljulaid became, of course, since then, she became real star of European politics, and I became her big fan. And it was my dream to invite her, to convince her to talk about something very modern state, and about e-governance, because Estonia is very famous for all the world about what Estonia achieved. And for me, it's a great honor that our speaker tonight will be President Kaljulaid. And also, I want to say that we have a great moderator who is a great friend of Ukraine and great friend of YES for many years. First time he attended our conferences many years, more than 10 years ago. I think it was 2007. And since then, many times, Prime Minister Blair was our great speaker, great contributor. And I think this is unique moment for us and great honor. Please welcome President of Estonia, Kaljulaid, and Prime Minister Blair. Prime Minister will be tonight just a moderator because, okay, floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much indeed. Please. So, God, it's so good to be asking the questions, not having to give the answers. But it's a real honor and pleasure to interview the President of Estonia, Kersti. We've both got 4 children and 2 grandchildren. But in her case, that's a surprise. So, Kersti, right. Estonia has become known as the government, the electronic government, the government that's taken its method of working to an entirely new level using technology. How did this come about?
Well, it started quite simply, actually. Estonian people demanded Scandinavian-style public services, and we couldn't afford them, so we thought we'll do it in an efficient way. We thought it's something like, currently it's called Industry 4.0, just automatization of the processes. We didn't realize we are unleashing a digital disruption of the society. But the reason we unleashed it was that we did it together with our private sector immediately, because we were so worried that the government will not provide enough services to justify the cost of the system. So we invited private sector to use the same platform. And this is how it started. Now we have a generation of digitally disrupted society already.
Do people in Estonia, they're sort of aware that market leaders globally in this issue? Does it give them a sense of pride? Tell me some of the ways in which they notice how their lives are different and better.
Yes, they complain a lot, and what they ask now is, look, people, you know everything about me. You know I just had a child, and you know I'm entitled to get some social support for this child, and you know my bank account number because I pay your taxes. Why on earth do I have to log on and apply? Cannot the state, simply knowing all this about me, just give me this money? So people are now demanding more. They are demanding proactive state and proactive services. So this is the reward you get. Once you start this transformation, it will become totally citizen-driven, I have to say. And it's very tough because our politicians, of course, now have to think about how to allow people off the loop, because this is what people demand, that the systems themselves decide and pay out. This, I can tell you, is something which people normally associate with artificial intelligence.
Right, but I mean, in Estonia, you will do virtually all your interactions with government online, right? Including tax?
The only things you cannot do is getting married and sell property. Everything else is online. But tax went online, 99, because everybody hates the taxman. Nobody wants to see the taxman. And this was our first e-service. Because, you know, we were not used to paying taxes. Because in Soviet Union, you didn't have salary, therefore you didn't have taxes neither. So we badly needed to make our people pay taxes. And we made it comfortable for them. Just go in the system. Your employer has already said what they paid to you. Everybody has written it down in the system, and then you just sign. It takes 2 minutes to file your taxes. It's much less painful.
And just to reference our debate earlier, I mean, the average income for someone in Estonia today is what? And where was it back in 2004?
2004, I don't have the numbers, but I can tell you that in 92 it was about $30. Now it's 1,300 euros.
Yeah. That's progress, I think. So,
don't tell me you're speechless.
So, when you've done this revolution, and I know many governments around the world try and copy it. Okay, 2 questions. The first is, some people say, yeah, okay, Estonia can do it because it's such a small country. So just answer that, Kanar, let's say.
Yeah, frankly, it beats me how the governments in the rest of the developed world have left their people without protection in the internet sphere. Your people are in the internet, your businesses are in the internet. They interact, they transact in the internet, yet you do not give them the secure environment of digital identity. They have to make do with Amazon, Google, Facebook, and then you bash Amazon, Google, and Facebook because it's not secure enough. I mean, governments in the rich world have not done their job. Simple as such, your people and your businesses need it from you, and they needed it long time ago. At least now, I think it's evident. In Europe, after the digital summit last year during Estonian Council presidency, it was decided that Europe will become digital. I hope it will one day.
Right, and you got, for example, electronic identity?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and, this has been often something around identity cards in the old days, you could call it, but this has obviously been something that's often controversial, but just explain how it works and works in a way that doesn't upset people's privacy.
First of all, I don't know what have Western democracies done to their people that they do not trust their governments with their data in the government databases. Our people trust, and the reason for that is that, first of all, it's criminal offense to snoop in the system, so nobody can do it. Second, there will be a sign, a mark in the system if somebody has been in the system, and therefore people can query. They have the right to query, and government has the obligation to answer. For example, if my office looks somebody's address to send an invitation somewhere, then people sometimes call back and ask, why did you look? And we have to answer. And guess what? It's much, much safer than your paper registry in your doctor's office. Do you know who read it last time? You don't. But in digital sphere, you know. And this is how you convince your people. You show that it's not absolutely sure, but at least it is definitely more sure than analog or paper version.
And I suppose it also allows you to keep a track of who's legitimately in your country and who's not?
Frankly, in case of the e-governance, you don't need to know who is currently in the country, outside of the country. Every Estonian citizen, for example, can vote wherever they are in the world. So geography is irrelevant in 21st century, and you have to make sure that your citizens can be still your citizens wherever they are.
Tell me what difference, because one of the things that's really interesting to me is that as the world is undergoing this revolution, governments often remain pretty much the same. I mean, I always say that in the 1945 Labour government and Prime Minister Attlee, if he came back to Britain today, he would think and look around and think everything had changed, and then he'd go back into government and he'd feel completely at home. And the strange thing is how governments have been so slow to adapt to this. But how did your system adapt? Did you find resistance? And tell me, is the government kind of smaller or different as a result of the enabling technology, or give me a sense of that?
Of course it's smaller. Our tax board employs 60% less people than it did before we went online with our tax
That would
collection.
be a pretty popular pledge. I can see someone running for office in the West and make your tax department 60% smaller. That would, yeah.
But I would also like to add that I agree with you that the basics of the governance have remained, that this is our liberal democratic values and human rights. Technology does not change that basis, and this is very important. Whichever technological base you are using, you remain who you were before. Digital state is a representation of your state culture. It's nothing new. It's the similar thing, the same thing.
But it is the case that the introduction of the technology won't just change the way government works. It makes it kind of smaller and more strategic, if you like. Is that correct?
It also makes it more transparent and more understandable for people, and their technology can help a lot. But again, you can create technological systems which will enhance your bureaucracy if you have too much bureaucracy. I mean, it doesn't resolve anything. It will only make your, heavy bureaucracy more efficient in harassing your businesses and your people if you do not, change your thinking that government has to support and serve the people.
So let's look ahead a little bit, because obviously, the forthcoming technological revolution is going to change everything, really. It's going to change. When I was in government, people kind of said, look, you have health policy, education policy, industry policy, etc., and then technology policy. But now, technology kind of covers everything. So if you look ahead, Kirsty, and think, what are the changes, for example, that might happen in health and education, and not just the services that government interacts with directly with its citizens, but kind of public services they depend on?
I think my favorite among them is education. Education, long time ago, needed to be more based on the feedback of the pupils' real knowledge. Nowadays, it's ridiculous to assume that what children know is a function of their age. Therefore, teaching cannot be a function of their age. And all this technology can make it possible to make sure that teachers are just guidance, and people can use technology tools in order to solve the problems in math, in physics, wherever, based on their skill set and knowledge set. Because internet makes little kids really smart and sharp, but they are smart and sharp in different areas according to their interests. And if we do not make use of this, what they already have, they will be very bored in the school, and that results in bad results, particularly for boys. So the school system will change this way. Healthcare, e-health, of course, well, many countries actually do have e-prescriptions nowadays already, so there's nothing new in that. Healthcare, we don't have enough doctors, then of course, web doctors will be there. And again, it's totally customer-driven, because all people, almost all who have internet connection, when they fall ill, they Google their symptoms. And right now, they find all kind of esoteric stuff. We need to make sure that they can find proper medical advice. That can only be given if we have a medical web doctor who is learning from the cases what they have already seen. So you see, big data will give space for self-diagnosis, which will make people get to the doctor quicker if needed, and that will actually preserve their health in much better condition in the future.
So, these are things that could happen. If you take education, what you're really suggesting is that the teacher becomes more of a guide. There is more personalized and individualized learning for the pupil. How will how will you shift your education system in order to take advantage of that? I mean, are you already doing it? And, you know, because one of the things you often find in government is reforming education systems is pretty tricky.
True. And I have to say, Estonians do not invent everything in the world. And I would like to refer to French. You don't believe, but I'm referring to French for innovation of school. And it's called Paris 42. It's exactly this. It's a guidance-based, interactive computer game of 21 levels. It's totally outside of the old-fashioned French education model, but everybody knows that if you graduate from that school, not even the 21st level, but already after 7th level, you become employable in ICT sector. And I think this is the model we need to follow. Basically, it will be computer game.
There you go. So, I mean, that French online learning service, right, that is outside of the French education system.
Yes, because it doesn't require any degree to enter, and it does not give you any degree when you exit, but people are also employable.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, if you think about it, this is quite revolutionary for governments. Because what often happens with governments is that they can't reform their public sector education systems because they won't innovate in a world where everything else is getting innovated. Okay.
I want to simply say, I mean, government by definition is not enable or incapable of innovation. I think legally permissive environments are created by governments for technology to use them.
Right, but that's, you know, when you think about that, so what you're saying is the government's role is to create the right legally permissive environment, and then companies and entrepreneurs and thinkers come in and use those platforms to develop technology. I mean, it's quite a different model of the state.
Yes, but actually we have it this way, because when we created our digital identity, we made it inclusive. This is the public sector word, inclusive. We gave the digital ID to everybody in Estonia. From the market viewpoint, this was mass market of Estonia. Everybody in Estonia was part of their market. So you see, here public and private interest came together. And indeed, of course, then the private sector started to use this mass market this way handled to them, and we did it together. And this is the trick, you have to do it together.
Right. No,
if you think you are talking about inclusivity and they have something different, which is mass market, then you are mistaken. It's the same thing.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think it's, in a way, I think this is more revolutionary than maybe you think it is. Because when you then come, for example, to healthcare, then, you know, I don't know what sort of system Estonia has, so it's a traditional like ours.
Single pay competition on the hospital side, but mostly public hospitals.
Right, so it's a sort of combination of like the National Health Service, but with a competition on
just better.
Right, well, I'm not in government now, so I can go along with that, because obviously that wouldn't have been true when I was Prime Minister, of course. But, so, okay, because if you take healthcare, you describe what happens in education, describe how your healthcare system would develop through technology then.
Well,
not where you are now, I mean, where you're going to be in the future.
Where we're going to be, well, there is one thing. Estonia is not only digitally legally permissive environment, it is also in other technologies. Only Estonia and Iceland globally have a population genetics law which allows, well, genetic analysis of people and discovery of the markers which might make them sick, for example. And by the year of this end of this year, I think we will have about 10% of our population covered by this analysis.
So they would be their genetics will be analyzed so that you can predict
yes.
what potential diseases or
precisely.
Conditions.
And if you do this for 10% of population, because you have relatives, you have roughly covered 30% of your population. This means that you are really approaching to the medicine which is preventing diseases, helping people to stay healthy, rather than actually later dealing with the disease. And you know what? We started it in 2000. And then private sector came into our legally permissive environment and created Estonian Genome Bank. And thereafter, you and other governments messed up the market for us, because without creating the proper law space, you started to buy these kind of services yourselves. And for 10 years, we couldn't gather the genome data for our people because we couldn't allow it, because you were much richer than we were. But then finally it got so cheap that we can now continue. And since we have this legally permissive environment, this means that now we are again ahead of you in really reaping these benefits for our population.
Look, I'm feeling generally inferior, frankly, at the moment, so...
It's true. I was there when we approved the Estonian Genome Law, and I was the member of the board of the Estonian Genome Foundation. I was so bitter when you came and ruined the market and started to waste public money, whereas private money was ready to do this. It would have done the same in other countries if you had not messed up the market.
Right, well, it's a little late, but I'm sorry. I actually remember... I did a huge thing with Bill Clinton about the human genome, which was one of the, well, actually, it wasn't the only occasion in which I gave an entire press conference reading from a script that I understood not a single word of. But anyway.
I have a degree in genetic engineering, so I'm much better off.
Okay. So, all right, healthcare. Law and order, how do you use technology there?
Yes, we do, but I have to say that there is ample space for us to make sure that our judges, jurors, procurers, advocates should not carry any paperwork to the court, and we are not yet there. I think we do have a lot of development in this particular sector to do, but we are also looking on how we can manage that. This is a sector which has been maybe slowest to reform because of course, there are lots of these criteria which internationally hinder your digital development, because you have to apply quite a big rule set, which actually is not thought out to be in the digital sphere. But we are now, when the rest of the world and the international law and everything is turning more towards accepting technology and interpreting digital space as analog, no different, we are getting there as well.
And would you, I mean, presumably you can also use it in crime fighting, right? Because you can analyze where crime is happening, you can accumulate the data much faster, you can see what potential hotspots are developing.
This is true, and also we can, I've just seen a wonderful way how microeconomics turns into macroeconomics, because our tax board has quite a lot of micro-level information about our companies, which will then morph, if you look at these plotted diagrams, into the macro data of unemployment and the trends of employment development, tax development regionally. So basically you can start to predict economic trends regionally, and if we so wish, and if the government is smart enough, which of course, as in every country, sometimes it isn't, then you can actually prevent terrible things happening in some part, for example, in economy and elsewhere as well. Yes, indeed, we do use this data. Important thing to notice, it's used in non-personalized format, always, always.
And have you any thoughts as a government about what, automation AI may mean for jobs in Estonia, and are you preparing your people for that?
Here, your own statistics of UK shows that you have quite a lot of independent workers. And a big proportion of independent workers are actually internet workers. Job is getting geographically neutral. You can work from Estonia for Great Britain, for America, for Spain. You can work in private sector in the future. Probably you can be a border guard and watch all the borders. I hope that the governments will be flexible enough. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any workforce because, people don't want to go to work. They want to stay where they are and work where they want to work. Job is becoming really geography neutral. And we now need to start to figure out how to save our social system, which is totally industrial model-based. People go to the work, they have a working address, they go back home, they have a home address, and then what the services you get from government is a function from your home address and your work address. This is gone, I'm sorry to say, and if we don't realize it quickly, young people simply opt out of our systems. So we badly need a radical reform, and everything I can think about what we need to do goes straight into the face of the OECD ruling. So, international understanding on how you treat companies and people for taxes. You absolutely need a new model because it's not anymore happening like it was. People work in different countries for different enterprises independently, and the biggest added value is in a narrow specialization and working exactly in your way of work, but not for one enterprise, not in one country. Who gets the taxes? That's my question. Who gets the taxes? Right. And it's a global issue we need to solve globally, even not Europe-wide. And we see this is already happening, and if we do not react quickly, young people opt out. They can, of course, go private, but I don't think that the solidarity models will then survive.
So, I mean, in this world where everything's changing in this way, what's the most important thing for government to do for its people? To educate them, to make them familiar with this new world, to prepare them for it?
I think every time somebody from private sector comes to talk to politicians and say, I see this is happening and I want to benefit from this development in technology or this change in the society, then you have to react positively, not to say, I'm sorry, this is not in our rule book. That's the best thing what you can do.
You mean making sure that you're using the innovation within the private sector to...
I mean, I'm sorry, you cannot only rely on innovation in the public sector. There is relatively little of it.
Right. But also, presumably, if young people want to be, and I agree with you, I think you can see there's a completely changing pattern of work developing amongst young people. I mean, I know this from my children, you probably know it from yours, they want to work differently. But they need a familiarity with that world, I guess. I mean, what you educate children for today will also be different, right? You need to educate them much more in creative thinking.
Frankly speaking, you need to educate them in human rights, how to be a human being within a society, how to interact with other people, how to exercise your rights without hurting the rights of the others, because that's all you can teach. And in this technological turmoil, you have to tell your kids, never mind which kind of technology you will be using. We cannot know that. We don't teach you that, but we give you these basic values. And they need to exercise them, whether they are tackling the climate change, which actually might need quite a lot of compassion of from humankind, or they are using the new interesting technologies. In both cases, you badly need to teach how to be a human being.
Right, so your education system actually, in one sense, will shift to what might be called sort of personal social skills, creative thinking, and so on. Okay, so we've gone through a number of areas, and we've seen how big the changes are that are happening and will happen, should happen, and some of the things that government can do. When we look at the populism that we've just been discussing, the interesting thing to me, and I just wanted to ask you this, is it seems to me that the first group of people that will be able to explain this changing world to this generation of voters and persuade them they can be optimistic about it, that may be the way that you defeat a populism that ultimately is about fear and pessimism and looking for someone to blame. Do you think?
Maybe I can say the same thing in a little bit less complex way, in a housewife-ish way.
Well, go right ahead. I mean, I'm always willing to learn.
I think new technologies and their application in school system will make it easier also for those countries who have really gone astray with their school system, in the sense that it's not at all egalitarian anymore. I mean, there are places where people went to bad school and then they have bad salaries, and their kids go therefore to bad schools and have bad salaries. So you have kind of no social mobility. I think we need to go, and where this has happened, you need to go and apologize to your people that you have allowed this to happen, and you have to recreate the egalitarian school system. This is the best tool to fight populism. And technology will help you there as well, because it will simply be cheaper to provide customized education to everybody in need. Never mind what their parents earn, never mind where they live, in capital, in suburbs, never mind whether their parents were there at all or not. Every child needs to have an education which will allow them to enter any university which they wish, and this guarantees you this that also your meritocracy is renewing all the time. And this is, I believe, the best tool to fight what you call populism. I cannot define populism, but I see big tranches of society, well, who have lost the hope that their future or their children's future will be better because they have been the have-nots for a couple of generations already.
Right, but it's quite an important thing, I think, that you're saying politically, because one of the things is that, these debates about technology can end up seeming very, technical, right, or prosaic. But really what you're saying is there are ways to transform society in a beneficial way through both understanding the technological revolution and using it creatively and sensibly.
I think technology is a great equalizer because young mothers with babies can work during nighttime. Young girls in Africa can learn Netherlands bookkeeping rules and work from Africa as bookkeepers in Netherlands. People who have no education can work as traveling YouTubers as long as they are funny and cute. So you see, technology development, it's not only for the well-educated with master's degrees, PhD degrees. Yeah. They only create the infrastructure, but actually it's striking how simple things really make money online. After all, what are the biggest, services which have made money in this sphere? Can you tell me? It's chatting. Long chats, Facebook, 140 characters, Twitter. It's nothing, it's no rocket science what makes money online and using technologies. So don't mistake that technology is only for well-educated. Technology can help those who have been left behind in our current societies as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. But what I'm really saying is politically, this is a more important thing than we may think, because it actually allows you then to go out and explain how you can make a more just and more equal society without either having a left wing that goes into believing that, if you recreate an old-fashioned state, you're going to deliver social justice, or a right wing that starts, frankly, saying your problem is you would have more if these other people weren't coming in and taking it from you. You see what I mean? I think what you're saying is really, really important politically. And that technological revolution is going to be the thing that we have to be able to master in the sense of accessing its opportunities and mitigating its risks and preparing people for. And that is really something that will cover all of politics today. And I think anyway, the question and it's a good place, I guess, to end is this. One of the things that's sort of strange about politics is that you might get a country that's with a small population, but for various different reasons, it can be an iconic country in terms of what it can teach the rest of the world. And how do you take that Estonian message out and give it to a bigger and broader audience so that people can see, the politicians who are struggling with this populist thing at the moment can see that there are a set of changes that are both radical and sensible, that are going to create a different society and a better society, but do so in a way that corresponds with the reality of the future?
First of all, step back from aggressively pushing people to change and reform. Create the necessary legal space for artificial intelligence, for driverless vehicles, for robot deliveries. For example, does British traffic code regulate between an accident between a car and a robot? Estonian does. Create the space and then let people and businesses to decide what they want to do with this space. This is my advice. And one more advice, and this is directly related to Ukraine, Georgia, and other struggling countries. When Estonia regained its independence almost 30 years ago now, you helped us a lot. You helped us, but you didn't think that we are doing it because then we will create this great experimentary state of Estonia, digital sandbox for everybody to try their ideas out and learn. You don't know whether Ukraine is the next one. So we need to keep helping Ukraine, Georgia, other struggling countries, because the next big public sector innovation might be here. Not anymore in Estonia, because we become complacent.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's a great point at which to end. And I think, as you can all see, and as I've seen this evening, Estonia is very lucky to have you as president, and you've got a lot to say, not just for people in Estonia, but for people outside as well. And it's an absolute pleasure to meet you tonight and to get to know you and to congratulate you on all that you have achieved. Thank you.
Thank you.